Looks like we're now live. Welcome everyone to the Committee on Taxation. We're meeting this morning for work sessions on 5 bills. We'll begin with introductions and we'll start with Senator Pouliot.
Morning, Senator Matt Pouliot, represent Senate District 15.
And Representative Bickford.
Not yet.
Don't see him here. Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Senator. I'm Mickey Carmichael. I represent House District 137 in Washington, Hancock, and Penobscot counties.
So thank you. Representative Collins, is he with us? I don't see him. Representative Gramlich.
Good morning. I am Lori Gramlich, and I represent House District 13, which is the lovely seaside community of Old Orchard Beach.
And Representative Hanley.
Good morning, I'm Jeff Hanley. I represent District 87, which are the towns of Pittston, Alna, Westcasset, and Wren.
And Representative Sekis.
Good morning. I'm Joel Sekis. I serve the people of District 105, which are the towns of Canaan, Palmyra, St. Albans, Heartland, Ripley, and Cambridge.
Excellent. And Representative Matlack.
Good morning. I'm Ann Matlack. I represent House District 92, which includes the communities of Cushing, Thomaston, South Thomaston, St. George, Matinicus, Creehaven, and the Muscle Ridge Islands.
And Representative Terry.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name's Joe Perry. I represent part of Orono and part of Bangor in the main house.
And Representative Sachs, I don't think is with us right yet, but she should be with us at some point. Representative Terry.
Good morning. I'm Mo Terry. I represent District 26, the west side of Gorham, and I serve as House Chair of this committee. And good morning to everybody.
Excellent. And I'm Senator Ben Chipman. I serve as Senate Chair of the committee. I represent Senate District 27, which is part of the city of Portland. We also have with us Lane Braun, who is our committee clerk, as well as Julie Jones, our committee analyst. Anything from you, Julie, before we get started? Or Representative Terry? No?
Nope, all set.
Great. So we will open up the work session. We're going to take the bills in the order that they're listed on our schedule. So we'll start with the work session on LD 484. This is an act to change Maine's tax laws. We'll let Julie walk us through the analysis on this bill.
LD 484 is Senator Chipman's bill, the original bill, a concept draft. At the public hearing, Senator Chipman presented a proposed committee amendment. And I think rather than start with a chart, because all it says is it's a concept draft, I will screen share the proposed committee amendment, which is relatively brief. So let me bring this up here. 484. That should do it. You've got it. What the proposed committee amendment proposes to do is to change the share of real estate transfer tax going to the home fund administered by the Maine State Housing Authority. What you see in this proposed committee amendment is the first section is simply ending the current distribution formula with the current fiscal year 21-22, and in section 2 provides the new distribution. Currently, the Maine State Housing Authority has the authority to issue bonds for certain purposes, and the statutes provide that the payment for those bonds comes from the home fund. So under current law, the real estate transfer, first of all, the question was raised at the public hearing of the share that goes to the counties. Under current law, the tax is collected by the registrars of deeds. They retain 10% of the revenues collected from the real estate transfer tax for the county. That would not change in this bill. That 10% would still remain in the county. What would change would be what happens to the 90% that comes to the state of Maine. Under current law, it's essentially split 50-50, with 50% going to the home fund and 50% going to the general, well, 50% reduced by the amount necessary to fund the bonds. that the Housing Authority is authorized to issue for funding the purposes of its programs. So what this bill would provide is that instead of the amount going to the general fund, the amount that would go to pay the bonds would still go to pay the bonds, but everything else in the state share of revenue from the real estate transfer tax would go to the Housing Authority for the home fund. So that's what the amendment proposes to do. That's what this language proposes to do.
I don't know if we could bring Eric Jorgensen into our discussion. I know he's here from Maine State Housing Authority, and some folks may have some questions for him. Committee discussion with Senator Pouliot.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm definitely in favor of us trying to move as much as we can to the home fund, but I think that I'm hoping we as a committee can coalesce around the commitment that we're really trying to make in the legislature and statewide with adding new inventory. So if you look at the home fund historically, in 2019 and 2020, only 16% of the home fund went toward preserving or adding additional units. It's really hard to kind of like drill down into how many was new units versus preserving. But I would hope that we could all agree that only 16% of that going toward adding new units is just not really going to get us to the point where we help alleviate the pressure and create downward price pressure on the units that are available, or just frankly equitable access to units. You know, based on some data that I got, only about $800,000 ever from the home fund has been used to create new housing. So we're talking about a substantial amount of money here. And I would like for us, I would really like to see us make an amendment to this that says that 50% needs to be utilized for new housing, because, you know, we're doing the bonding for that, which is good. I support that. We're doing but we need to do everything that we can, I think, as a legislature to create more inventory. So I'm just putting it out there for discussion, because the home fund's a great fund, but it has like a lot of little niche programs. It's like a little sprinkled here, a little sprinkled there, which is good stuff that's being done, but it's not advancing us on our objective that I think was bipartisan support for building more inventory to close the gap of the 13 or 14,000 units that we're short in the state. So I'm just putting that out there for discussion. I'm hopeful we could maybe get agreement on something. Frankly, the 50% of it's just an arbitrary number I came up with, but you know, if we could make a statement to that, I think that would be good. I think anyway.
I hear what you're saying, Senator Pouliot. I think part of what we heard from Eric Jorgensen last time on the public hearing is that some of the money that the home fund spends is to keep people in their homes, like in the case of wells going dry and people couldn't stay living there if they had a dry well. They solved that problem, you know, several summers ago when there was a drought. And so there's just different things they're doing to help keep people in their homes that would otherwise result in increased, much more homelessness than we have today, which is even too much.
Yeah.
Gary, you have your hand up?
Well, I just had a quick follow-up. If
Yeah, go ahead, Senator Pouliot.
I really appreciate the work that Maine Housing is doing. Eric Jorgensen, great ambassador for what's going on. But the reality is that Maine Housing doesn't like to be told how to spend the money. You know what I mean? And I think that it's our role as a legislature to be more forceful about that, you know, but I'll leave it at that.
Good point. Representative Carey.
Yeah, thank you. And I agree with Senator Pouliot that I think it's the legislature can help with that we can allocate where money goes to. I wonder though if we're the right body to do that with this particular bill, if we are we're in our wheelhouse, so to speak, about doing that. We had this discussion earlier today, honestly, about doing that exact thing or putting it into housing. But I'm just not sure that we're the body to do that. I wonder if that's something that Labor and Housing would and should tackle. I would imagine that building new housing has a very broad definition, and I'm not sure that that's exactly what we want to go for with a broad definition. I think we would want to narrow it down, that is. So I just want to throw that out there as well.
Before we go too much into additional discussion, I'm wondering if Eric Jorgensen wants to introduce himself, maybe respond to what Senator Pouliot could just raise as an issue and what Representative Carey just said. Welcome, Mr. Jorgensen.
Good morning. I'm glad to be here. Thank you very much for bringing the issue up. I think I appreciate Senator Pouliot's comments. I would just say that we are generally quite steadfast in our opposition to statutory restrictions on the home fund. And I'll tell you why. It's really not that we're trying to just maintain control, but it's a highly variable source of funding. In recent memory, it's received as little as $6 million in a single year. Now it's at the $23 to $28 million a year. It's a very volatile amount of money that comes in and out of it. This would certainly be a huge increase to that. But I think the issue really is for us is we don't generally want to fund long-term programs with short-term money. We don't know, we've never put a program into the home fund that would have ongoing requirements each year. And I think that's a really important thing. We don't know how much money that fund's going to have in it next year. And I think our concern really, if we put certain restrictions on the fund in terms of proportions or amounts certain, what's going to happen is developers are going to want to carve out, realtors are going to want to carve out, homeless advocates are going to want to carve out, weatherization people are going to want to carve out. I mean, the program funds a lot of stuff. And it was created basically when the real estate industry agreed to not oppose the idea of turning over half the real estate transfer tax to these very specific purposes. The other thing I'll just point out is that I think actually using it for construction would be better than using it for another kind of program, actually, because construction is a variable kind of, it expands and contracts, and we fund more or less of it in a given year. And I also just wanted to say first, I see Representative Hanley here. I had promised you some information on the home fund and its geographical distribution, and I just haven't been able to get to it, and I really apologize. This work session snuck up on me. I will get that to you very soon. But I also would say I don't know where this statistic about $800,000 for construction came from that was just cited by Senator Pouliot. But I think that's our basic issue, though, is we really don't want to. We really are concerned about it. The program really funds three things right now. It funds affordable home ownership for first-time home buyers. I think everybody would agree that's an important thing for the state. And it's also been harder and harder to do lately, so it requires more subsidy. It pays for homeless shelters, which helps subsidize those. It pays for. It also pays for the weatherization program, which is very important, and home repairs. It pays for home repairs. So those are all things that the current program does. This is the state's only money for affordable housing that it gives. And so it's a pretty important source of revenue for us. The other thing I will also just point out again, I think I said it last week, but I think it's very important that we don't take any money for administration or anything out of it. We use it all for purposes that are directly related to low-income housing. The final thing I'm just going to say, just before you go on about the issue of a program being put into it by statute. Last year, there was a program that was presented to your committee, which was about property tax relief for elderly homeowners. And that was proposed to be funded out of the home fund. And it's a great program. I don't have an objection to the idea of reducing elderly people's property taxes, but the question really came up was how would it be paid for? And the bill that you guys got said that it would come out of the home fund. Fair enough. then, but you ended up sending it to the Appropriations Committee saying, please find another source of funding for this. That was unable to happen. Currently, that program is just starting now. It's going to be funded out of the ARPA money for the next couple of years. But once that money's gone, all that cost is going to come from the home fund. And I think that's a program where conceivably, it's not hard to imagine that we would be using that to subsidize lakefront homes. I mean, that kind of thing. It's a case of homeless people subsidizing homeowners, and I don't like that. And I think that's a concern of mine that I worry about. That program does include a provision to pay back the home fund ultimately, but I think if you get on that kind of a program at the age of 65, you might be on it for 20 years before your house is sold. So I just caution you about adding in specific requirements for use of the home fund. I would say that, please make recommendations, please urge us to do certain things, but I think specific program chop outs or carve outs is going to be really hard for us. So that's all I'm going to say. And again, I know you guys these are all good programs. They're all important programs, and I'd be happy to, share with you more detail if you need it.
Thank you for that. We had a question and discussion from Representative Stepkus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Probably a question and a statement all in one. My understanding is the creation of the transfer tax, I believe the history behind it was to actually create low-income housing or affordable housing. Maybe that's the new term. I'm not sure which is which. My fear at this point, and one of the things that I've seen in my time in the legislature is that tax that was created for a specific purpose is being used for a multitude of things. Does anybody know historically, is what I've heard correct, that it was specifically created, the legislature specifically created it for low income or affordable housing?
Does anybody have a response to that? Or do you know, Mr. Jorgensen? Does anybody else here maybe know?
I'm looking into compendium, but it doesn't seem to have specific information on that.
Yeah, Google didn't help me out much either.
Yeah, it looks like Julie might be looking it up in one of her
We can
fabulous.
get a response to that. Yeah, because I'd heard just anecdotally from a real estate agent that the real estate transfer tax was established to get money into the home fund for these type of things. And that at one point, the fund used to get all the money as this bill is calling for in it, and then it was rated by the legislature in the past. But that made just anecdotally that I heard from a real estate agent. So it'd be good to find out some history on it. Senator Pouliot, you had your hand up, followed by Representative Perry.
Thank you. The data that I got was from Maine Housing's report. I can send you guys links to it, but the reality is I'm not saying that we should put all of the money toward creation of new units. I think that it's reasonable to say 50% would go toward new units, or 40 or 35% or whatever the committee is okay with, but not all of it. So I'm not suggesting we shouldn't have any of those programs. Certainly the first-time homebuyer program is a substantial utilization of the funds, which helps people with down payment assistance if they complete a first-time homebuyer program, which is really educational, informative. It's a great system. But for that injection of resources, a lot of folks wouldn't actually be able to close on their loan. So that definitely helps people get in, start paying property taxes, build roots here, be a part of the main life. But I just finished, showing a property, some people that, 2 years ago, we would have sold for probably 280,000, and now it's 425,000, the same place, just to be competitive. And if there aren't 10 more of those houses built next door, that place is going to be 500,000 3 years from now. So I do think that we are the appropriate committee, because I think every committee in the legislature is the appropriate committee to be discussing this crisis that we have about access to housing in Maine. And it's even more critical down your way, Senator Chipman and Representative Terry, where you see it daily. It's just obscene. And some people might be like, well, it's greedy people just trying to squeeze more. I mean, it's supply and demand. There is not inventory. And so I understand the apprehension on Maine Housing's part about not wanting direction from the legislature, but we direct things all the time. And I just feel that there's a lot of consensus on both sides of the aisle that we got to add more inventory. So I don't want to beat a dead horse, but if that means that we need to table this bill and work with another committee or be more thoughtful and directive about this, I think we have a crisis and we need to address it by adding more inventory.
I hear you, Senator Puglia. And I'm hoping we can, get to a place where we're all on the same page. It's a bill, it's an important issue. I think we all agree, and hopefully we can all get on the same page with something. Julie, you've got your hands up.
Yes, I just wanted to mention the real estate transfer tax predates even me. It was originally enacted in 1975. So I'm not aware of original in legislative intent, but can do the research. But I don't know what its primary purpose was at the beginning.
Representative Sachs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do want to caution, number one, that the senior property tax deferral program that we passed does have income guidelines on it. So while that house might be a small house on a lakefront somewhere, Mr. Jorgensen, there are income and municipal ordinances around eligibility for that program. However, I am cognizant that that is a much needed program that we did state has to go to the home fund. And I'm cognizant of the additional strain it will put on that. I am less a fan at this point of our committee putting any parameters. I'd like to see a voucher program for homeless folks supported through this and have a designated percentage of funds going for that. But I'm aware that there are lots of legs to the stool, and that those in the Maine State Housing Authority Board and others, they direct where funds go and have authority over that. Whereas our role with this particular bill, in my view, is to say we would like the real estate transfer tax to go to the home fund, period. Because I have a lot of wish lists, and Mr. Jorgensen, you and I can talk about that at a different time if you'd like.
Can I respond?
Yeah, go ahead.
My only argument about the elderly tax deferral program really is that I can see situations in which someone is in a house that has, with a really restricted income level, and yet have a very valuable house just simply because they've, a spouse has died or something like that. I mean, it's not an inconceivable concern. I know there are restrictions on that, so I didn't want to mischaracterize that program. But that, what was the other thing you said that you were talking about? Now I've totally lost my thought on that. I'm sorry.
Well, she did touch on the voucher program, and I
yeah,
ask you about that as well, because Frank D'Alessandro had reached out to me, and there's a strong interest in a state-run voucher program, as some states do have, and we don't have in Maine. We have a long wait list for vouchers. So I know you and I had talked about it, but I wanted to ask you in the work session to see what your thoughts, if you talked with other people and about that.
Our real concerns with the voucher program are that vouchers are very expensive. They go up every year, and people on vouchers, unless it's designed as a very short-term program, tend to stay on them for a long time. I mean, if you look at Section 8, most of the people on vouchers are disabled, they're elderly, they're not people who are, floating in and out of the program necessarily, unless they float out of life and leave and go on. And that's there's just not a lot of turnover in that program. And so I think that's our biggest concern, is creating a program that would require an ongoing commitment of funds to people who hold those vouchers, and what that would mean, particularly in the light of the fact that this particular fund is very volatile. I mean, that's, again, getting back at that essential issue. I think, frankly, the issue of funding construction is an easier one, because those are construction investments are a series of one-time expenditures you make depending on what you're doing. So and I think some of the other issues around that is those are easier to I think those are that would be an easier program to support than for us in terms of the mechanics of it, than having a long-term voucher program. I'm not saying that a voucher program would not be a good thing, but it's something that not very many states have tried it simply because of the cost. I mean, a Section 8 voucher is around $8,000 or $9,000 a year, and you start doing the math, and it adds up very quickly. You very quickly get to a very large number. So I just suggest that. I mean, all these numbers they don't seem that big when you have an $800 million surplus, but generally speaking, this is going to be things get very tight very quickly. The other thing I just add about the home fund, which I think is really important to talk about, and I think it's something if the legislature is really trying to be constructive in this, the legislature has removed more than $80 million from the home fund and diverted it to the general fund over the years, always for good purposes, or it seems like it. As a former member of the Appropriations Committee, I was part of some of that. So that's an area where I think we've got to really, if you really want to protect the home fund, also look at diversions, because that's a very serious problem that we've been dealing with that represents untapped, or it represents an opportunity cost of housing related stuff that's not able to be done.
So with the idea of a voucher program, just to clarify, if we did set up a state-run voucher program, say for 100 vouchers, we were going to set up for 100 vouchers a year. You're saying it's $9,000 a year per voucher. That could be a $900,000 expense, and if the fund got down to 5 or 6 million because it fluctuates with the real estate market, and one year you said it was 6 million that it received, it could end up being like 20% of all the money the fund got for the year, and that could put a real squeeze on other things that the fund spends money on.
Yeah, it's a lot of problems. Other states, the few states that have state voucher programs, I do think run into trouble because rent goes up every year and the cost of a voucher goes up. And, unless it's designed specifically to be a very short-term program, it's a very hard, it's hard to see the mechanics of how it would work. Again, it's not a bad idea, but I would tend to think that, construction is it does expand and contract more easily. And I think that would be if you felt the need to put some kind of restriction on this additional money, I wouldn't choose to put it on a voucher program.
Okay. Representative Steckles.
Thank you. Yeah, just two things. For me, I think it's vital to know what the historical creation of this tax was. I did serve on Labor and Housing for 4 years and the IDEA Committee for 6. So my recollection over those years of people from Maine Housing and others, I think is where I'm getting this. I can't completely recall, but getting the idea that this was created so that we could build more low income housing. And then consistency is another thing. In that case, is gas tax was created for roads and bridges, right? I mean, I don't think we would ever choose to spend the money on something. I would hope we wouldn't support spending the money on something other than roads and bridges with the gas tax. And in this committee just a couple of weeks ago, I think we unanimously agreed on the tobacco tax. That's supposed to go to cessation. So I think we need to be consistent in that situation. And I guess thirdly, it wasn't 2 things, it was 3. In this fund, if the money is put towards the construction of new inventory, as our real estate friends call it, as a contractor, we call it housing. But anyway, it's basically a circular renewable fund, because as a building is built, it's sold, there's a transfer tax collected, it's put back into the fund to help generate another home. So, it's sort of self-funding as long as we continue to put the money where it's supposed to be going.
Mm-hmm. I think Representative Perry was next, followed by Senator Pouliot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't going to address the home fund question of Representative Stickis, but I remember being told that at one time, 90% of that money went to counties. That was more like a revenue sharing, and over time we took it away from them. We reversed it. 90-10 the other direction, but I want to talk about vouchers only because I've had some constituent calls and people I know from my business who have told me these stories that they have had a Section 8 voucher, which pays $840 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment, and they can't find anything. And they're desperate because their voucher is going to expire and they still haven't used it and it will be gone. And I know of at least one family, they moved in different directions, but left the state of Maine because the daughter and the brother or the father, they each independently had Section 8 vouchers, and one went to Colorado and one went somewhere down south because they couldn't find anything here. So I think that illustrates that maybe the housing stock is the more pressing problem than a voucher.
Good point. Senator Pouliot.
I agree completely that with Honorable Jorgensen, that putting this into a voucher really isn't going to help us really primarily because of what Representative Perry just said. So, I mean, I'll just break this down for you a little bit. I'm not proposing that we give 50% of the whole transfer to housing. What I'm saying is 50% of the new proposal of this. So effectively 25% only of the home fund would be the legislature saying, hey, we're serious about creating new housing, and here's why we're serious or how we're serious about that. But like, let's just say we are going to transfer 25 million extra. That would basically be 12.5 going toward new housing. If you take the average of about 200,000 a unit for a LIHTC project, and that's just probably a low on some and high.
That's
on
very
some.
low. Yeah,
that's low. Yeah. So if you take a low of 200, divide out the 12.5 by 200. I just want to try to illustrate how inadequate we're being about this. That's 62.5 units. We're not even like, so it's like, I think we should put more toward it. But even if we just did a modest, 25% of the home fund, and if you look at it from the perspective that that's probably leveraged, let's say you want to use 20% of the 200,000, like it still doesn't, or 80% of the 200, it still doesn't even create more than like 200 more units. So it's like grossly inadequate, but I feel like and I also think that when this comes around to, support from the administration, I know that they're real serious about creating the new housing too. So anyway,
Be about 60
probably just leave it at that.
Seems like we get about 60 units a year of new housing, so it's a start, I guess. Mr. Jorgensen, go ahead.
yeah, I just say a couple of things on that. I think that's fine. I would say just be sure you do this with the marginal money that's coming in as opposed to the whole fund. I mean, I think if we were to rechop the whole fund and put it into some kind of requirements, what will end up happening is you will lose out on first-time home buyers, and those are also a source of creating apartment vacancies. I do think the issue is absolutely acute in terms of production, and so much of that is related to the issue of all the stuff that the zoning commission is working on. There's a lot of areas that are impossible to develop. So I mean, I think there's a lot of good things that are happening, and if you were to take a portion of the new money to come in and restrict that, that would make a lot more sense to me, and certainly I think we'd be receptive to that. The other thing I would just say is, probably we would not be using this money to pay directly for units. The way we work it, we finance properties and you pay for them through a whole bunch of different things. So this would be providing subsidy, which is the difference between what you'd make in rents and what you'd get for tax credits to build it. And then you have a gap, and this would help fill that. So actually $200,000, a $6 million chunk of subsidy is actually a valuable thing. It goes a lot further than just saying you're going to take the number of costs of the apartments and chomp them out or divide them out and pay for them that way. So I think we'd stretch it further than that and get more units than that. So I'd just say that too.
Can you just give us maybe an estimate, like if we did do this 50% of the new funding and say it is 12 million, new funding is 25 million and 12.5 million would be half of the new funding. How many units of housing a year would we get if it stayed at the current levels for $12.5 million of a year going into it for the new housing?
One of the maxims that I learned on appropriations was never, ever try to do math on Mike. And I don't want to even go there, but the way it works is our treasurer, I can send you, I've got a cheat sheet that I put together for when I first started working here that talked about how tax credit development works. And it explains the whole issue of gap financing, and I will send that out as soon as I'm off this call.
Okay, excellent.
Send it to the whole legislature, please.
Not sure who had the hand up first. I think Representative Sachs maybe, and then Representative Perry.
Well, I was going to continue to argue that we shouldn't put restrictions, but Mr. Jorgensen, if you're going to say, well, I'm fine with that, that's going to be a little bit.
No,
more
I'm not fine with it, but I can live with that, but just make sure it's on the marginal amount.
Right. Well, and I was going to say again, the fact that we have such a diversity of opinions on this committee, I agree with you that the voucher program is completely underfunded, and Representative Perry, that no one can afford in today's market the amount that is given in a voucher. So programs like a match program, so that people can avail themselves of market rates, utilizing a voucher is an effective way to go. So again, I am fully supportive of this bill. I personally would not put restrictions because there are other entities to do so. I wouldn't start slicing and dicing here, particularly given the cost of construction right now. There might be a better use of those funds in a different program right now until the cost of construction comes down a little bit. So, and again, knowing that the senior property tax deferral program is coming, anytime we designate in this way and slice and dice, whether it's municipal revenue sharing or other places, this is where I get a little bit nervous. And I do believe that there's been an impetus for all of us to say that every single leg of this stool is important and that we need to focus. And we're pressuring Maine State Housing to increase production, utilize those funds in effective ways, et cetera. So thanks.
Representative Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I may be wandering off from the bill a little bit. I've never served on labor and housing, but this is a curiosity of mine. Excuse me. I've never really felt like my take that affordable housing is all that affordable other than for the renter. I mean, if we're talking $200,000 or $300,000 per unit to build it, I mean, that's substantial costs. And it seems like a lot of people in Bangor are paying a lot more in rent to live in a fairly crummy apartment than I pay for a mortgage on my home. And the biggest barrier, and they seem to be able to manage the rent, but they can't manage to get into a place. The biggest barrier is the upfront costs, down payments, and closing costs and such. And so and I know you do programs to help people with that, but an even harder thing to do is to build something. Does Maine State Housing, and if inventory is a problem, does Maine State Housing have any programs to help first-time home builders to get new stock that way, taking the money directly, case by case to a potential home builder?
It's a great question. I don't think we do specifically. I mean, we've focused a lot on first-time home buyers. We also have a program right now for landlord incentives, because a lot of landlords aren't accepting vouchers at all. And we're trying to incent them to do that with some help with some of their repairs and some other things that might make it a sweeter deal. But I would say the first-time home buyer program is a critical part of that. And you've just sort of provided an advertisement for that, Representative Perry, in the sense that with our program, what we can do is we can get you about a percentage point, 100 basis points off what would be a commercial loan or a loan that you get at a bank, a typical bank. And then we also can give you $3,000 or $4,000, I think it is, on toward your down payment, and that does help. And the extra percentage really makes a difference in terms of the amount of house you can afford. And that's right now. It's like, I mean, the market is broken right now. I think Senator Pouliot would agree with me on that. I mean, everything is so chaotic right now, and the costs are going up. And I think that carries through to the construction industry. I'm looking at Representative Stetkes. I mean, it's the supply chain things, the cost increases. I mean, we're getting estimates that change by the month, it seems, here in terms of construction costs. So, but we definitely would support, we will work with any new developers that want to come in and work with us. And the issue really is if you're trying to use federal tax credits and the state tax credit and those things, these are very complicated processes, and they involve a lot of lawyers and you've got to form a limited partnership, and it's just hard to access those things. Yet those are the key to making these kinds of projects work when you're trying to shoot for a 60% AMI kind of rental arrangement. So I don't know if that's a good answer or not, but it says we're definitely aware of these problems and interested in expanding the number of people who can build stuff. I think there's so many different factors, and I'm very grateful for the legislature for tackling so many of them relative to the zoning issues and the financing issues and all the other stuff. So I appreciate all of it. So we appreciate all of it. It's not me.
Yeah, excellent. Senator Puglia.
So when you get the analysis from Eric on the gap, it's going to be probably somewhere around 100,000 per unit. So when you talk about 12.5 on 100K per unit, you're looking at basically about 125 units, Senator Chipman, to answer your question. So yeah. Not a drop in the bucket. I mean, the projected number of new units with the bond that I worked on with, or the bond and stuff we've been doing with LIHTC credits with Speaker Fecto. I mean, they're kind of coalescing around maybe an additional 1,000 units, So if we're doing 125 a year for the next 5 years, it's another, 525 units or something. So my math now on Mike is getting fuzzy. That's not the right number, but you get the point. 625. So, it's not a pittance.
No, it isn't. It really does make a difference.
Of course, that will fluctuate with the market, but if it stays strong and the amount of money coming into the fund continues, that's what we'd be looking at. So, Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Senator, Mr. Chair. I just wonder if it wouldn't be prudent to table it, and while the sponsor works on maybe a new amendment to change the numbers and that make it something we can all get on board with.
Yeah, I mean, we could. I mean, we do have to. We go under kind of a time crunch, and it sounds like the Maine State Housing is open to the idea of 50% of the new revenue, and that seemed to be what Senator Puglia had suggested. I don't know if everybody else is okay with that or not.
I can live with that. I think that's a good idea.
I mean, it would be good to get everybody on board and have a unanimous vote if we can. Is that something that you'd support, Representative Stetkes?
I would probably support 100% of a tax that is meant to do something to actually do what it was meant to do. But 50% gets us halfway there. I'd probably be happy with that at this point.
Okay, we've got a couple more hands up. Do you have anything else, Representative Carmichael? Okay, Representative Hanlon.
Yes, thank you, Senator. Having been in inside the machinery of the State House for the last 7 years, I've discovered that government agencies have to be directed. If they don't get direction, things won't happen. So I think the proposed amendment is reasonable and logical, and looks like everyone's pretty much on board with it. I'd like to make a motion out to pass as amended with the amendments proposed by Senator Puglia.
And the one from Senator Chipman that Ms. Jones brought forward.
Yeah, that's the bill's a concept draft, and I presented the language at the public hearing. So we need an amendment that sought to pass amended using that language of the amendment, and then adding to that the 50% of new funding that comes in from this going toward construction of new affordable housing. That seem okay to everybody? And there was a motion. Do we have a second on that? We have a second from Representative Carmichael, and the motion made by Representative Hanley and Representative Sachs.
Is this just new construction or is it rehabilitation? If you're trying to, or I think Senator Puglia, you had talked about, is there a difference between the two? And if we're trying to get new units in, is it sometimes rehabilitation that would create a new unit as opposed to new construction? And is that a allowable
Yeah,
use?
that's a good point, because it might cost a lot less to rehab a building than it would to build something new, depending on the condition of the building. But do you have a response to that, Senator Pouliot?
1,000,000% behind that. I mean, if someone can demonstrate, we deal with these old buildings like in downtown Augusta, for instance, and I just had a guy that wants to add 6 units in a building, and the state fire marshal's like, you have to add a second stairwell because that's new code from the fire marshal. Well, it's not new, but it's a code, and the cost to do that's really expensive. And this guy would love to bring those on. So if there were something within, I'm not saying Maine Housing, hey, 12,500,000 has to go toward LIHTC units only, new construction. You know, I'm not drilling that far. Maine Housing, they're big adults with great boards and a lot of resources. If they can demonstrate that this created a new unit, the least expensive way to create a new unit, and best, frankly, for the environment, is to take a building that might only be like a 2-unit right now, and with our new zoning changes allows for a 4-unit and make 2 more units within that existing envelope. That's great for the environment, and it creates 2 new units at a much lower cost for sure. In fact, if we could find a feasible way to Maine Housing create a program, but we're the tax committee, I'm not going to create that whole program in one work session, but I think that's a great point.
Maybe we'd want the amendment to not say new construction, but to say toward the cost of making new units available.
Yeah.
That was my point.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Hashtag LD 1694, Ms. Senator Pouliot. It's on my brain. Thank you.
50% of the new funding being used to make new units of housing available, affordable housing available, basically. Okay. Representative Terry.
Okay. So I think that we do have to drill down for sure if we're going to be, if we're not going to just put the whole thing into the home fund. I think we do need to actually drill down on the language that we give to Julie. If we're going to do that, I think we can give her our intent for sure, and maybe Senator Chipman, Senator Pouliot, Mr. Jorgensen, and Julie together could form the language that we approve on amendment, if that's okay with everybody. But I do think that it needs to be, I think that it needs to be drilled down for sure. We have, I believe the home fund already helps with rehabilitating buildings. That's one of the things that they already do. And, you know, if it creates more units, I think that's going to be beneficial to the owner of the building for sure. So why wouldn't they be doing that anyway if they could? So I think, Mr. Jorgensen, if you're okay with jumping in on that amendment language, that would be helpful.
We'd be delighted to do that.
Okay.
So you're proposing that we vote today and then have the 4 of us work on the language of the amendment to look at it, the amendment review, or are you proposing that we table it today?
No, I think that we can probably vote today and have you all jump in on that. I think if I'm seeing the screen correctly, I think we're all in agreement that we like the idea of taking the real estate transfer tax and putting it into the home fund, but making sure that part of that is geared towards new units. And I think that, you know, exactly how we get there is important, or exactly, exactly the language is important, because we are putting in essentially a new thing for Maine Housing. So I would want to make sure that the language works for Maine Housing as it does for this committee. And again, I think from what I'm hearing, I think we're all, you know, in agreement that of what needs to be done. So I think that we can probably vote on that. I mean, if somebody else thinks otherwise, I'm happy to.
And if we do that, if we do, as you suggest, Representative Terry, I mean, certainly willing to work with Mr. Jorgensen, Julie, and Senator Pouliot on that over the next, week or so that we have that for language review. So, Senator Pouliot.
I'm happy to work on that. I think that we there's too much at stake here not to, and I agree with the sentiments about like trying to recycle as well and utilize existing buildings to try to make more units. So I'm sure we can find a way to thread that needle.
Okay. Representative Sachs.
Yeah, that's all. Again, I'm not a fan for nonprofits having designated funds. So the more broad we can make that around creation of additional units. And that includes rehabbing, as long as the definition is of a new unit, however that is defined, I'm fine with it. So thanks.
Okay. Any additional committee discussion? Are you all clear? Are you clear, Julie, on what, are you okay with that? Representative Hanley, you made the motion, so you're okay with that clarification to making new units available as opposed to just being new construction?
Yes, that's the intent of it anyway. Any way we can get people into actual housing, physical housing.
You had your hand up, Representative Terry. Do you have anything? No.
No, I'm all set.
Representative Steckes?
I'm not sure if this is, the appropriate vehicle, but Senator Pouliot talks about, basically the big guys that are producing units. I don't know if there is a way to make this a little bit more palatable for even the single unit areas, because in rural Maine specifically, most all units are single units, and we're lacking those as much as in the more urban areas, the multi-units. I'm not sure if that's anything that can be done with this. I look forward to see what everybody comes up with.
Do you have anything else, Senator Pouliot?
No, I just wanted to share with yes, I guess, share with the committee that those are my sentiments as well. We have a lot of mom and pop folks that want to try to do what I described earlier, like make a duplex into a 4-unit or something, just as an example. I think that's how we really start to move the needle, because these LIHTC projects are great and needed, and it provides beautiful quality housing for people to move in that are in some tough economic situations. But it's just not, it's just won't get us fully the way there because of the cost of construction. And it's almost too bad, because it's almost like only the big guys can do the LIHTC projects because of all the layering and the mezzanine financing and the attorneys and everything, so to be able to find a contractor in Canaan, Maine that wants to just add a couple of units and we can help them with this program, I think that's a huge win.
Yeah. Okay, great. Additional committee discussion. You have something, Mr. Jorgensen?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to add, just thank you again. I think this is a good approach. I mean, one of the things, we currently have the largest pipeline of housing in our history in terms of stuff that's being built right now. We've got, over, I don't know, a lot of units, over 1,000 units, I think, are currently in the pipeline. And the only way to keep that going is through subsidy, and this would be provide subsidy. I also would just point out that we're just launching a new program on, it's a low-income housing, single-family subdivision program that we've had, but we just reauthorized it with $10 million of ARPA money. And I would direct anyone interested in doing small single-family developments to that, and that helps provide some subsidy to create sort of. We're thinking about all those like post-war houses that were built that are little capes and things that just you can't build today. At that, or people aren't wanting to build these things at the kind of price point that they need to be built at. So we're trying to do that with this program, and we really feel that's an important thing for rural areas. So that's just an advertisement. Happy to talk about that some other time, but I'm really looking forward to working with you on this bill.
Excellent, thank you. Seeing no more committee discussion, we've got a motion on the table to pass as amended. We've had a second. All those in favor, please signify.
Thank you. Also,
That is unanimous of all members present. So we'll close the work session on LD 484, and we will go into work session now on LD 1334. This is an act to promote economic development through increased film incentives, sponsored by Representative Salisbury. We'll wait a minute for Julie to.
I'll bringing up the chart here.
Excellent.
LD 1334, you can see the chart now, right?
Yep, we can.
Okay. Is it big enough?
You can make it a little bigger, but I think it's probably big enough. I can see it. Yeah, that
Okay.
looks good.
I'll do that. LD 1334 is Representative Salisbury's bill, as you mentioned, carried over from last session. I'll mention what current law does, and Representative Salisbury has a proposed committee amendment. I don't know if you want to focus very much on the bill, the LD that's carried over the way it is. Her amendment would replace the language that's in the bill. So I'll talk about that unless you tell me you also want me to talk about the bill, which does quite a variety of different things. Under current law, we have two types of incentives for media productions, visual media productions in the state. One is a non-refundable income tax credit equal to 5% of defined non-wage visual media production expenses if a company has more than $75,000 of eligible expenditures on a project in Maine. The second incentive is a reimbursement. It's not a credit, but it provides that the certified visual media production can apply for reimbursement of a percentage of wages, production wages paid in the making of the visual media production project. The reimbursement is for 12% of wages paid to Maine residents and 10% for wages paid to non-Maine residents. The sponsor has proposed an amendment which was emailed to you last week and is available online. I also have it available to screen share if you want to do that this morning as well. The proposed amendment replaces the bill. It increases the current credit for non-wage expenses from 5% to 10%. It changes the threshold of eligibility of the credit of amount that the production has to expend in Maine. It reduces that amount from $75,000 to $25,000 in order to be eligible. So lower budget projects would become eligible. It increases the payment for services by an individual that may be included from $50,000 to $75,000. It makes the credit refundable, and it changes the reimbursement for Maine residents, wage reimbursement for Maine residents from 12% to 15%. I think Representative Salisbury is with us and probably should address her amendment as well.
Okay, maybe we can hear from Representative Salisbury at this point. And if you don't mind, Julie, maybe you can put the amendment up on the screen if you have that handy. Or
yes, I can do that.
Welcome, Representative Salisbury.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate the ability to present this amendment to you. So we, after we started talking last year, we've had some meetings that have incorporated the Maine Film Office, DECD, the Maine Revenue Office, and stakeholders, and we've met to kind of come up with something that would address the concerns that have been raised. The bill is definitely quite a bit different from the original bill that was submitted, but we feel like this bill in the present iteration is something that could be supported through the different offices that would have to be involved. So again, it's a much more streamlined version of that original bill, but we feel like it does make some progress in our goal, which was to support film productions in Maine.
Okay. Any questions from members of the committee for the sponsor? This time. And I know we also have Eric Van Wyk in the attendee list. Maybe we could bring him in. You all may have seen an email from him, which I got myself as well, and he had some things he wanted to point out about some of the changes, and he did a lot of work, I guess, on this legislation over the years. If we could bring him in and see if he has any additional information to provide us, that would be great. Lena, could you bring him in? His name's Eric Van Wyk. He's in the attendee list. I'm not a host, so I can't do anything like that. Mr. Van Wyk, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I'm just trying to, do I start video here? Okay, can everyone see me?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, we just wanted to ask if you had any additional information to provide to the committee. We're in work session on LD 1334.
I do, and thank you, Senator Chipman and members of the Taxation Committee for letting me be a part of this work session. I just jotted down a few things. I don't want to take up too much of your time. So I'll just try to go through them briefly. The main thing with the proposed amendment is it's shaved off about 4 pages of the original bill, 4+ pages, which is a pretty significant percentage of what was originally proposed, and a bill that was written by myself. As Representative Salisbury mentioned, there were several meetings. I was not a part of these meetings, so I just sort of received these changes myself. I just want to start by saying that the goal of this bill, when I wrote it and drafted it, was threefold. It was, one, to make Maine competitive enough to bring in more outside production. 2, it was to build up and train Maine-based crews so that they can make a decent living here and elsewhere. And the 3rd, and just as important, is to keep as many dollars in state as possible when film crews come. You know, the previous issue that was on the table just talked about the spike in housing prices. I think a lot of that is due to many people coming from out of state to live here in Maine, searching for sort of a saner kind of bucolic lifestyle. A lot of those people are actually film people. I know some of them that are coming in here looking to generate work, and I think this is a good thing for the state. This has always been a jobs creation bill for me, about creating more jobs and growing an industry. So the problem with the amendment that's been proposed, at face value, it seems like slightly increasing those percentages is a win. But it actually won't do that much to bring in outside production. The baseline for any sort of competitive incentive is usually around 20-25%. So it doesn't really meet that criteria. And at the same time, it gets rid of all the protectionisms. As Julie mentioned, there was a multifaceted bill that I proposed, and I realized that it was, asking for some maybe what seemed like unusual criteria, but with the goal in mind of keeping dollars in state. So it's sort of like by marginally increasing these percentages, it sort of disables sort of all 3 goals. It's like adding too much salt, not enough pepper type thing. One of the things, for example, is that, and I was surprised by this because the Maine Film Office, in many discussions that I had with the Maine Film Office previous to this, was not including airfare as a reimbursable non-wage expense. The Maine Film Office was quite adamant about having this, and justifiably so. If you have people coming in from outside, flying in from, say, California, Maine taxpayers shouldn't be subsidizing their airfare. I thought that was totally fair, totally valid. That is gone from this new amendment. Another thing that we talked about and was in the previous bill is not Maine taxpayers not subsidizing above the line non-local salaries. So what that means is anybody who comes in from, say, Hollywood or New York that are actors, producers, directors, executive producers, their salaries would no longer qualify for a wage expense. So these are things that I thought was quite important, so that, you know, again, taxpayers aren't on the hook for, you know, some of the sort of less relevant expenditures that happen on a film that don't necessarily directly benefit the state. So I guess I'm just seeing if there's anything else. I'm trying to just sort of go through the broad strokes. And finally, it removes the per production caps, which again would have kept the fiscal note low, but also kept the cap on the size of the films coming in here. So the sweet spot for us was sort of that $5 to $8 million range film, where Maine still can subsidize something like that, but it's large enough to be relevant in terms of hiring a local crew base. So it removes those per production caps, so the sky's the limit for whoever comes in, and it removes the sunset dates on the non-local crew. So what that means is that in our bill, in the original bill, you had a 5-year sunset, so that by year 5, non-local crew, meaning people coming from away to work here, their wages would no longer be subsidized or incentivized. So basically, if you're coming here, if you want to maximize that incentive, you have to hire 100% Maine crew. And that sort of goes along the lines of trying to build up a Maine-based crew here. So you have, you know, professionals that can then work here, make a living, go down to Boston, which obviously there's, you know, a lot of production there. Some in New Hampshire, they can go anywhere. You know, my idea, really, the goal as a Mainer and knowing people here, and I've talked about this at length, obviously, is there's so many people here that do not work in film right now, but have easily translatable skills. And I'm sure you all know people as well, people who do makeup, hairstylists, construction, you know, all sorts of things that could easily slide into a crew job on a film, and suddenly they're making double what they're making before. They're getting health benefits, and they're able to have a better better life, better, you know, cost of living, essentially. So that's really what I was after. And so this just to finish up, this bill and this amendment, while seemingly you know, raising those percentages a little bit, I don't think will do that much. And my fear is that if it passes, which I'm not saying I don't support it, I guess any incentive is a good incentive, but my fear is that it will, the pendulum will swing the other way. Whereas if we don't see the results that we're hoping for, people will suddenly sour on film incentives, not sort of knowing the broader application of what can be done with them.
Yeah, well, and I mean, my understanding is that there's been some changes made, maybe to get support of the administration, and maybe Representative Salisbury could shed some more light on that. But could you explain, Representative Salisbury, that some of the, I mean, there are some fairly significant changes to the bill, but is that to get the support of the department and the administration is something that they would support, whereas otherwise they weren't maybe willing to support the bill in its original form? But,
as I mentioned earlier, thanks for the opportunity to respond. As I mentioned earlier, we had a series of meetings that involved the governor's office and DVD and the Maine Film Office. And again, this was the result of what we felt that could be supported. Like I said, it is quite a bit different from that original bill, but I feel like, you know, this was as a result of meeting with the Maine Film Office. So yeah, it was what we thought we could get supportive. I feel like, you know, to be honest, at this point, I think that we're at a point where, you know, hearing from Mr. Van Wyck and maybe some other film advocates in Maine, perhaps this bill needs to go back to the drawing board under someone else's hand that maybe has more experience in dealing with the film office, et cetera. I think that we've, unfortunately at this point, have reached a point where I think that the original intent has been lost. So I would like to request that the committee vote ought not to pass.
I mean, do you think that some of the changes are more geared towards smaller production already in Maine that's going on? Because I did hear from a company in Portland that does smaller production that were supportive. I mean, would it be helpful for them, people that are already here making smaller films, to have the smaller incentives that are outlined in the amendment?
I think it would. I think our original intention was to gear it towards more small to middle level film productions. It wasn't designed sort of to have those big companies come in. So I think, you know, potentially it would, but you know, I'm glad to hear more from the rest of the taxation committee on your ideas, but I am concerned, you know, at this point that perhaps the original intention won't be met, so.
Representative Terry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I agree with the original intent not being met at this point. And I do hear, Mr. Van Wyck, what you would like for this to be. My fear with passing this today would be that we would make a change that would help people that are already here, not help attract people, and then jump back in next session, or, you know, in the future to make yet again more changes. I think the film industry is a business. Business is not a fan of inconsistencies. I feel like perhaps the time now is to take what we've gotten here and build on this to, you know, adding Mr. Van Wyck's thoughts on this more, but take what we've done here today and put this into a bill for next session that would attract those mid-level businesses. I think what this does, just by looking at the numbers alone, this helps attract this or keep the small businesses that are here working and maybe working a little bit better. But I wouldn't want to make such a change now and then do it again within the next 2 years. I'd rather see the whole thing kind of all built together to help our current companies that are here, but also to attract companies that are on the mid-size but bigger than what we've got here level.
Yeah, but Representative Terry, I mean, wouldn't it make sense to make good use of the work that's been done and pass what we have here and then build on that with another bill down the road to do something that attracts more people from out of state and help the people that are in Maine now and do something now with what's been developed here?
Well, that's what I'm saying is I'm not sure that, again, you know, I'm all about consistency and you know, having, we'll talk about another credit in the next couple of hours that I feel, again, just there needs to be consistency for the business community to be attracted to come here. And if what we're trying to do is to attract new people to come here, then for me, that means holding off, taking this work as it's been done, but taking that and building next session for a credit that includes this, as well as some of the other changes that Mr. Van Wyck is requesting.
Senator Pouliot.
Thanks. So I should preface this by saying that I think we absolutely need a credit like this to be competitive in the film space, but I unfortunately feel that this have been watered down too much for us to make much progress. And so I would say that the best thing to do would be to continue working, you know, over the summer for another bill and inclusion in the 131st that may be more comprehensive. I know this was super comprehensive when it started, but then it got pared back. So it's like, it kind of started where we needed it to be, but then it sounds like, but then it got turned into something that isn't going to be entirely helpful. So for those reasons, I would make a motion about not to pass.
Second.
We have a motion not to pass made by Senator Pouliot, seconded by Representative Terry. Did you have anything else you wanted to add, Mr. Van Wyck?
I do, and thank you for those thoughts, Senator Pouliot. I mean, just two quick points. First, Senator Chipman, to your point, and Representative Terry's point, those small businesses, I'm also, I think in the same loop or same email that you were referring to, and they also, those main small businesses would like to see increased incentives. So we're disappointed. They were disappointed by how much the bill was watered down, because they felt those increased percentages would help them. So it wouldn't just be mid-level businesses; they would also be affected too. But I think the bigger point, and obviously I'm disappointed with this turn of events, but I have to say, quite honestly, having been at this for 5 years. If we can put together another bill and bring it, to the committee next summer, but we're going to continue running into the same problem. And I'm just saying that now and putting it out there. This past year, we had a lot of support. Obviously, the governor wanted a bill and privately told people she wanted a film bill. I think there's broad public support for it, and I think there's broad legislative support for it. I really do believe that. It's very different than when I first started. But you have to ask yourself why the Maine Film Office is watering down, and I'm using Senator Pouliot's words, is continually watering down and shrinking this bill. I think that's a question you all need to ask yourselves. And I think as long as the Maine Film Office in its current incarnation continues, we are going to keep running into this problem, because the governor tasks DECD to oversee this. DECD then in turn tasks Maine Film Office, and Maine Film Office sort of operates outside of the purview of pretty much everything, and is brought in as a sort of voice of expertise. And this is the result. And this is something I've been dealing with, like I said, for 5 or 6 years. So it's extremely frustrating. I'm not the only person who feels this way. I'm not the only person who's sort of been stonewalled by this process. But I think if people are serious about it and legislators are serious about it, then you need to sort of start looking outside this bill at what exactly is happening and why we keep arriving at this point. Because for this bill to fail at this point, after all the support we've had, and plus that there's a surplus, and we can easily fund it, and I think the fiscal note would be low, is definitely a cause for concern.
Representative Salisbury, you have additional information or anything else you'd like us to know about?
Oh, no, I just wanted to thank you guys for taking the time to hear this and listen to this information. It's been a learning experience for me, and I appreciate the opportunity and hope that the Maine Film Office and other stakeholders can work together to come up with a bill that will be able to be passed.
Julie, you got your hand up.
I just wanted to mention, I meant to mention it at the beginning when I was presenting the information about the bill and the proposed amendment. OPEGA wanted me to let you know that this credit is in their next batch of full evaluation reviews that they're going to be doing, that they have just begun their research into the process for how to go about evaluating this particular tax expenditure, but they will be doing so it's one of the next ones on their list. So there may be a report available from them in their tax expenditure review process, perhaps in the next year sometime. Also, Maine Revenue Services had some technical concerns if you were going to move forward with the bill. That's it.
Senator Pouliot.
Yeah, thank you. So I was just going to say that I think that piggybacking on the OPEGA review and then coming back, one thing, if there's not anything I didn't learn about with the Opportunity Maine overhaul, I mean, it's just persistence and sticking with it, and so to you, Eric, I think that you know, your sentiments are not falling on deaf ears here at all. It's just that we need a little bit more, I think, of a coalition built around this for next legislative session. And I think that with some real empirical data from an OPEGA review, we as a committee can feel more comfortable, you know, going forward with or not with some changes. You know what I mean? I think that kind of an approach would probably bear more fruit.
Thank you.
Representative Collins.
Oh, yes. Good morning. Thank you, Senator Chipman. I'm probably, out of everyone on the committee, the least versed on this issue. However, I was very, you know, excited about this opportunity, and I do think there's a lot of potential. I've known in some states where state governments have gotten behind industries, and I've seen some good results from that. Some other states, it has been less so. So I would like us to really work on this and do it right. And I think Maine just has potential to do a real lot with this industry. So I would be committed to, if unfortunately we can't do anything at the moment, I would echo Senator Pouliot that I think we all want to see something happen. And I think we can lay out a course to do that. So I'm hopeful that we can turn this around and make a strategy to do something even bigger and better than what's been proposed now. So people that are in the film industry, and especially local people in Maine, I hope you know that we are in support of this, and we'll continue to work with you. So thank you.
Thank you for that. And Representative Terry, you had your hand up.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would also, I guess, like to echo that sentiment. I co-sponsored the bill. I was very excited about the bill and wanting to do something. I've heard about this bill over the last several years. I think Senator DeChambeau proposed it a few years back, and that didn't pass. And you know, just wanted to see us make some progress on this. It's kind of exciting that more movies would be made in Maine that are already being made. I know this had some parts of movies made in Maine, but to increase that, I was actually out in New Mexico, ran into Representative Terry out there at a conference, and there was all kinds of filmmaking going on in Santa Fe. And it's just like, if we could, you know, Netflix is there, you know, and they have a lot of really enticing incentives, and that's the reason why that's happening there. So to be able to do something, maybe not quite to that scale, but something along those lines in Maine was really exciting. So you know, it's unfortunate that we are where we are. I mean, I'm still willing to pass what's been proposed so that we can make some progress, but I'm not sure where other people are there with that. Go ahead, Representative Sachs.
I just wanted to thank Representative Salisbury for all of her work and efforts in trying to find a workable solution for this bill. I will be voting ought not to pass, but I really appreciate her collaborative approach in working with all of the various entities here and bringing forward a sensible proposal that you thought could move the needle, but we also will respect the work that you've put into this and your recommendation for ought not to pass. But thank you, Representative Salisbury. Really appreciate your work.
Yeah, thank you so much, Representative Salisbury. I appreciate you reaching out and asking me to co-sponsor the bill and all the work that you put into it. And I hope we can use what you've come up with as a launching pad for a bill for next session and build on that work, as Representative Terry has suggested. Representative Terry.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just, since we're thanking, because I was part of a few of these conversations, the film office is doing the very best that they can, and I am saddened that we couldn't get everything pulled over the finish line. But at the same time, I think that we did a lot of good work. DECD, the film office, and DAFS as well. So I know that we've got a good solid start to this for next session, and I'm really looking forward to making something great happen for next session, for sure. Thank you.
Excellent. Representative Sachs.
Mr. Chair, I move to call the question.
Oh, okay, yep. I think we're all done and nobody else has their hand up, so we're ready to vote. Motion is ought not to pass. It's been made and seconded. All those in favor, please signify.
Thank you.
That's unanimous of all members present. So we will now close the work session on LD 1334. Representative Terry, you still have your hand up.
Oh, sorry, no.
So I guess we'll keep moving along. We'll now open up the work session on LD 1732. This is an act to amend the sales tax exemption for nonprofit housing development organizations.
It's LD 1732, again, is a bill that was carried over from last session. It was printed quite close to the end of the session. There wasn't even a public hearing held last year, but the public hearing was held earlier this month. This bill is an act to amend the sales tax exemption for nonprofit housing development corporations, sponsored by Representative here. The bill provides a sales tax exemption for sales to nonprofit housing development organizations. Under current law, there is an exemption. It only applies to nonprofit organizations developing housing for low-income people. The bill would provide that rather than just saying low income, it would say the exemption applies to families having income less than 120% of the U.S. Housing and Urban Development median income for the area adjusted for family size. There were a couple of questions raised at the public hearing. One was about what the definition of nonprofit means. There actually is a definition in the sales tax law for nonprofit, and it means things that are qualified under the Internal Revenue Code section 501C. You're frequently familiar with charitable organizations, which are 501c3. There are other types of organizations than the 501c3 that are included in 501c. In fact, there are 29 categories, but there are a variety, they all have to be nonprofit, and there are a variety of differently organized and differently purposed types of organizations. How many of them would actually be developing housing? I don't know, but the other question was with regard to the 120% of HUD median income for the area, what was meant by area. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development has a very complicated list of median income by area. In many instances, especially in Maine, it is counties, which was mentioned. Although I did notice that in counties, for instance, in Penobscot County, that Bangor and Brewer and a couple of these smaller communities surrounding those cities have a different calculation of median family income than rural areas in Penobscot County. On the other hand, it appears that everything in Kennebec County, regardless of whether it's Augusta, Waterville, or Mount Vernon, have the same median income for Kennebec County, regardless of whether they're what we would call urban or rural. I'm sure that HUD has a way of identifying whether they consider something urban and entitled to have its own median income. But it looks like in most instances in Maine that it would be on the basis of county, but in some areas where there are larger urban areas, there may be a separate amount for the urban area than for the rural area in the county.
Okay.
That's all I've got. Oh, no, I did. We have not had a fiscal estimate on this bill, but I did include the information that Maine revenue estimates for the current exemption for low-income housing estimates a revenue loss annually of about in the range of $50,000 to $250,000 a year, and that there are currently 163 exempt organizations under this category. That's all I've got.
Committee discussion. Representative Sachs.
I make a motion to ought to pass as amended if we get a fiscal note.
Second.
We have a motion not to pass as amended. Did you say with the fiscal note or if we did a fiscal note?
If there's a fiscal note, I hadn't seen one yet. I know the bill just came out. It seems like a completely sensible bill. So, thanks.
There will be a fiscal note for sure.
Yeah.
We have a motion not to pass as amended with the fiscal note. Committee discussion, Representative Stuckis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Obviously coming in late on this bill, wasn't here for the hearing. Read over the testimony. There was some good points brought up as far as nonprofits. Selling to nonprofits is already there's already there's no sales tax there. I have a problem with. I mean, if we're going to be working on expanding housing in the state of Maine, picking and choosing one entity over another that provides housing is not help. I don't think it's helpful. If we think that providing this exemption to these taxes is a good thing, is going to work for promoting housing, then why don't we do it across the board? So until we do that sort of situation, it's not something that I could support.
I can respond to that a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead. I didn't see your hand up, Jerry. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative Stuckis, we actually have been working on, and as with the former bill, working on tax credits for nonprofits as a whole, as opposed to all of the certificates that we give out regularly. So we are working on that, just so you know. We're trying to keep it clean, so to speak.
Senator Pouliot.
I would just say that I hate taxes, and anytime I can join my fellow Democrats on this committee to reduce taxes, I'm on board.
Your fellow Democrats.
I mean, my fellow legislators that are Democrats.
Did you see my thumbs up? I'm like, we got him.
Oh,
Good.
man, this thing's being recorded too. I'm sure that'll be used nicely.
Got it on record.
We welcome you, Matt.
Press release is already out. See ya.
I've been accused of worse.
Representative Stuckis.
Sorry, I didn't explain myself very well. I guess what I meant to say was across the board, including not only nonprofits, but for-profits as well, on reducing the tax burden.
Fair enough.
And Representative Gear, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative Stuckis, I just wanted to respond a little bit, because one of the challenges we are addressing with this bill is the situation that many of the existing nonprofit developers who have grown up really in response to the challenges that this committee was discussing an hour ago with regards to 484, which is the fundamental increased costs in building affordable housing and market rate housing for folks earning up to 120% of HUD AMI. Basically what that means is that it is becoming increasingly difficult for any for-profit developer to actually build a house that fits that need, simply because in most places, because of the cost of land and the underlying costs that you can't get out of the system unless you take a nonprofit approach. And so many of the housing trusts are taking this approach. And a barrier that they identified as they've gone forward is that when they were building and some of the kit-based models that they're using Maine businesses to build the houses, they found that Maine Revenue was determining that for that chunk of housing in between 80 and 120% of HUD AMI didn't qualify for the existing tax exemption. So the whole purpose of this is to, if we want to encourage the types of organizations that can attack this challenge head on, this really helps, because it can take a chunk of the cost out of those houses, making them more affordable for that target population.
Great, thank you for that. Additional committee discussion. So we have a motion on the table about to pass as amended. All those in favor, please signify. You have everybody, Lena?
Oh, I'm on mute. Hold on. I believe that was everybody but Representative Stetkis, correct?
Okay.
Thank you.
All those opposed? Representative Stetkis in opposition.
We ought not.
Your motion, your report, Representative Stetkis, ought not to pass.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So his report is ought not to pass. Minority report. All right. Great. So we'll close the work session on LD 1732. We have 2 more bills left to go. We'll go right into work session on LD 1763. This is an act to update references to the United States Internal Revenue Code of 1986 contained in the Maine Revised Statutes. I believe this is a department bill that was introduced to us by Representative Carey.
Yes, this is the annual Maine Revenue Services bill to update the conformity to the Internal Revenue Code, to change the date from what's currently says April 30th, 2021, to change it to December 31st, 2021. I think at the public hearing, Maine Revenue Services mentioned that given the potential for additional activity at the federal level, which would have an impact upon taxes for this year, that that I think they requested that you delay. I don't want to say as much as you can. They're here to speak for themselves, but they would certainly want to be able to include future federal changes to a certain extent, at least, depending on what they are, if enacted before you adjourn. I know there's some concern about voting on bills. They're required to vote on everything by March 11th. It occurred to me that if you wanted to hold this one for a potential late federal activity, that one possibility would be, even if the taxation committee votes on it the way it is, you could table it once it gets to the floor and hold it there for a while to permit a later amendment if needed, rather than keeping it in committee for a long time.
Yeah, that's a good point. Or we could vote on it and then hold it in committee as well. It's another option. So.
Well, you've got a reported out date to March 25th. Everything has to be reported out of committee. That's the deadlines.
Yeah, I mean, we could vote on it, but then one of the chairs could hold it in committee until we get closer to that date. Maybe. But, Representative Terry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to bring in someone from MRS and see what their preference is at this point. I feel like it's one of those things where if it's just a date change, it's no big deal. But if there is some stuff that comes in here, we may want to have a committee discussion about it. Is there somebody? I'm sorry, I lost my participant screen there.
Well,
I just got, there he is.
Thank you.
Dr. Allen's coming in. Dr. Allen, are you with us?
Before he starts speaking, I feel a need to point out, you can do obviously whatever you want, but once the committee has voted ought to pass as amended on something, staff is under pressure to get those amendments to the floor. So the committee holding on to them for a long time causes internal issues with regard to why bills are not being reported out of committee in a timely fashion after the committee has voted on them. I just wanted to mention that. Obviously you can do it, but it's up to the chairs, I guess, what actually gets reported out of committee. But that's it. I've had my say.
Dr. Allen, welcome.
Thank you. Well, I'm not an expert on what can be held and what happens once it leaves the committee and gets into the legislative process itself. If it could be delayed in some way a little longer, I would say once we get to maybe mid-March and you folks are under pressure to move things along, I think you move it along. If something happens after that, then I guess the budget could be a vehicle. Because if Congress does something after you enact this and it's of a significant nature that, conformity is going to have an impact on the budget, then I suspect it would have to be built into the supplemental budget.
Okay. Representative Terry.
So I think I'd like to make a motion to table this bill until mid-March. Sound good, Dr. Allen?
I think we appreciate that.
Yeah.
We have a motion to table the bill till mid-March, made by Representative Terry and seconded by Representative Matlack. That's not debatable, so I guess all those in favor of tabling, please signify. That's you're in favor of tabling, Representative Hanley? He is, okay, yep. So that's unanimous of all members present. So we'll close the work session on LD 1763. That brings us to our final bill today for work session LD 1941. This is an act to clarify and update the Maine Seed Capital Tax Credit Program, sponsored by Senator Curry.
Pulling up the chart. LD 1941 is, as you said, Senator Curry's bill to clarify and update the Maine Seed Capital Tax Credit Program. Bill makes changes to improve the effectiveness of the tax credit program based upon concerns raised in the 2021 tax expenditure evaluation report of OPEGA. I don't know if you want me to go through the list of all the changes that are made here. Maybe I should just read them quickly, and you probably want to call upon Senator Curry to also address the bill. It reduces the tax credit from 40% to 30% of the eligible investment for the seed credit program. It raises the aggregate investment limit from $3.5 million to $6 million, with not more than $5 million in a single calendar year. So that's an investment in a particular project, but has a cap of would have a cap of 6 million, but no more than 5 million in a single year. It removes from eligibility investments in visual media production companies. It defines export activities more narrowly, which is generally in the form of excluding investments in the tourism and hospitality industry because those have been justified as being export activities because they serve primarily people who come from other states to Maine. That was one of the issues that was raised in the OPEGA report. Most of these were raised in the OPEGA report. It provides standards for review by FAME of applications for tax credit. Currently, there's a definition of what's eligible, but there are not prioritizations from FAME in terms of which applications ought to be have priority over other applications, given that there's a cap on the amount that can be approved. Prioritizing certain activities or certain conditions would change the quality of the applications that actually got improved, as opposed to just first come, first serve. It increases the amount of information required to be provided in annual reports by eligible businesses to FAME, and provides a financial penalty if a credit certificate is revoked for failure to report. One of the issues that was raised in the OPEGA report was that there currently is not a lot of reporting with regard to performance by the businesses that receive these types of investments, and therefore they found it very difficult in many instances to evaluate the effectiveness of the seed credit program, because they found that there was not data available to support an opinion one way or the other. The bill requires an application for a tax credit certificate to be submitted within 60 days after the date of the investment. It prohibits credits for investors and their family members who hold more than 25% interest in the business receiving the investment. Currently, it would prohibit credits for investors and their family that, if I understand it anyway, that hold any interest in the business receiving the investment. So this would permit them to hold at least 25% and still qualify for the credit. It provides that the tax credit for individual investors is refundable. Currently, the credit for private venture capital funds is refundable, but for individual investors is not. So this would extend it to both. Under the seed capital credit, there are two categories. One is for individual investors and one is for private venture capital funds. And finally, it requires state agencies administering the seed capital tax credit to establish a working group to review issues identified in the OPEGA report relating to administration of the credit, and submit a report making recommendations for improvements to the tax committee and to OPEGA by December 1st of 2022. I have the recommendation sections from the OPEGA report that I can pull up for you if you want me to. But perhaps you want to consult with Senator Curry at this point. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think he should be joining us momentarily. Talk about his thoughts on the bill. Representative Carey, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna see if Julie, would you mind pulling up those recommendations? If you have them in front of you.
If I can find them.
Maybe. I think we have them in our, do we have them in our committee materials, or is that on GOC's committee materials?
I lost it somewhere in the process, but let me bring it up again, and give me a minute or two.
No problem.
Okay, let's see if I can do this.
Lena, Senator Curry needs a link. He just texted me. I don't know if you can send him the link to get into the meeting.
Okay, one more time. Well, now I'm having sharing problems again. Sorry about that. I'm sorry, I can't get it to come up.
I sent it, just waiting for him to pop up. There we go.
So I just want to say, I think it's important that we see what the review looks like. Oh, you got it?
No,
No, okay.
that's the wrong thing.
Julie, if you tell me where it is, I can, I thought, oh, hold on a sec.
Are you looking for it?
Yeah,
It is, if you go to the taxation committee materials page
Mhm.
and you go down towards the bottom in the first regular session list tax expenditure review category,
yeah.
it will be there.
Okay, great. All right, let me see if I can pull that up then.
The report itself, OPEGA reports are organized differently. They're not all organized in the same form. What they have done is to go through the report and point out a number of instances where they felt that the data available to them was not adequate to draw certain conclusions. Basically, though, they ended up, I think it's on page, second, I've got it here on the thing. Starts on page 25 of the report. A summary of areas of misalignment between program goals and program design. And then there are, following that, 2 recommendations, one of which recommends that the legislature, in consultation with FAME and DECD as appropriate, adjust the program's reporting requirements to allow for effective oversight of whether the program is meeting its goals. And the second one is OPEGA recommends that FAME improve their processes for program data collection, analysis, and reporting. I believe that Chris Roney is here from FAME that can address what they may have done since this report as well, since it was a report that did come out last year. So there may have been improvements in that regard. But they also did include a chart, which is on page 25. Oh, you've got it.
Can you guys see it?
That's it.
That's it,
Which mentions areas of what they called misalignment, areas in which they felt the program design, essentially the requirements of the program were not well designed in order to accomplish the program goals of increasing investment, identifying intended business beneficiaries, increasing employment, increasing municipal tax bases, and promoting innovation, goals which are specified in statute as as some of the purposes of this particular program.
So if I may, Senator, is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead, Representative Carey.
So on the bottom of this page, it says that the misalignments between program design and program goals, the diversity of expectations for the program suggests that a fresh look at the program goals would be beneficial. So my thought on this bill in general is the last part of it gets just to that, which is, of course, the last part of the GOC report as well, to take a fresh look. Senator Curry suggests that we establish a working group to review this. I can say that as we talked about with the tax expenditure working group a couple of weeks ago, and we'll speak about that again when we do the work session on the bill that came from that, or the public hearing that is that it needs to be looked at for a number of things. And I'm not positive that the bill that we're looking at here attacks all of those things in the right way. And if there's ever going to be enough time for us to really dig into each of those pieces, period, end of story. Doesn't matter how long we've had the bill for. So I wonder if perhaps just working on the working group is something that the committee, or putting together a working group is something that the committee would be interested in.
Representative Terry, I think there was also some interest in maybe putting some stuff into statute too as well, or do you not want to suggest that at this point?
I thought I did, quite honestly, but at the same time, what we decide to put in statute for reporting materials may not fit with what the program goal is. So I wonder if just getting the working group started, it will also help with the tax expenditure working group work, because one of the things that I hope that we'll accomplish with that is going back and making sure that all of our tax expenditures get a better look and have better data collection on the front end as well as the back end of it. So this would be a good start to that as well. We'd have some extra help in starting the program that way. So again, I'm interested to hear what other members have their thoughts on that.
Excellent, thank you for that. Senator Curry is now with us. Senator Curry, do you have any thoughts or additional information you'd like to provide to us? We're in work session on your bill, LD 1941.
Thank you very much, and I've been able to hear a bunch of it, and thank you to your clerk also for sending a new link. I will say that I put this bill together from the deep concern that we saw out of the GOC report and the design flaws that you're all aware of, and expect a thorough conversation of that to figure out how do we have a better design to achieve our mission in a context of recognizing the very strong importance of this program. And so if that conversation, if we don't have the time or the expertise to do it with this bill, then I'm perfectly happy to have it be as part of a study, a part of a working group to move the ball forward on that, in order to establish what are our goals for this program, and then how will we go about measuring those and determining that we're being effective.
And Senator Curry, do you have any thoughts on who you would like to dig into this? I know I do.
I would like a couple. Thank you, Representative Chair Terry. I would like a couple members from IDEA, because we're certainly living in the space, but around economic development, and have some extra expertise in that area as well. Obviously members from taxation and I would think members of GOC would make sense with staff support, and then bringing in we clearly would be bringing in the experts to present and to educate those legislators on this process.
Okay, so you're suggesting 2 members from each of the following 3 committees: taxation, IDEA, and GOC. So it'd be six legislators, as well as an analyst, one of the analysts from one of those committees.
I will defer to, I would think representatives, whether it's 2 or yes. I mean, I think there's obviously flexibility there.
Okay. What are folks' thoughts on that? This bill did propose to do a a lot of things, and there's a sort of all-inclusive bill to address several issues, but maybe working groups the way they go. Representative Starks.
I support this approach proposed by Representative Terry. I certainly would like to take some action, but I appreciate the testimony that we heard about, we just changed the program, so let's evaluate some of those changes within the context of this new report as well. Prudence is fine, but appreciate that there would be continued work on it with this approach. So I certainly can support this, especially if the sponsor feels also that that's a really good way to integrate and have a more full discussion in this short session about this really important program.
Okay. Any additional committee discussion? Someone like to make a motion? Representative Terry.
I would like to make a motion to, well, actually, Julie, let me ask you real quick. Do I make a motion on the bill itself ought not to pass, and then have the working group be something that the committee pulls together, or would it be ought to pass with just that last line in it?
Yeah, how are working groups set up, Julie? Do you know? Would it be ought to pass as amended and just simply establish the working group, or?
I feel like that's a resolve too.
There is a joint rule regarding legislative study. So the one that's in the bill does not design it as a legislative study. The language that's in the bill in section 15 requires FAME, DECD, and Maine Revenue Services to establish a working group to address the issues and bring a report back to the tax committee and to OPEGA by December. If you're going through the joint rule version, then it is the legislature may establish legislative study committees or may alternatively refer matters to joint standing.
Is a working group a study, or is that separate?
It's separate.
Well, I think if you're that there's no such official thing as a working group. We call lots of things working groups, but it's just what we call them. They're essentially legislative studies. The one that established, for instance, the tax expenditure review working group last year was a joint order from Senator Libby. But I don't think there's any reason why you can't include it in legislation as well. It becomes a resolve at that point if what you're doing, if that's the only thing you're doing.
Right.
If you're not amending statute in any way, it becomes a resolve rather than an act. But that's a technical matter, and there are provisions in the joint rule about the legislative studies. You can also have members on them that are not legislators, but they have to be, but it has to be a majority of legislators. And the reporting date has to be no later than the first Wednesday of December, preceding the convening of the second regular session, or in a first regular session by the first Wednesday in November.
So we could get it done in time to put together a change, essentially another bill before the beginning of the next session. That would make it so there'd be time for that.
Yes, and it provides that the working group itself, the legislative study group itself, cannot present legislation, straight to the legislature. It would have to go to the committee of jurisdiction, and then the committee would be authorized to report out legislation.
So Senator Curry, would you be in favor of the taxation committee being the committee of jurisdiction, or would you want it to be GOC or IDEA?
Thank you, Representative Terry. I would assume that in the same way that this bill came to you, that it would come to taxation as well.
I think I agree with that.
Yeah. So it would be a we amend the bill to essentially set up a working group. The bill would then become a resolve. And then we'd give the taxation committee the ability to report out a bill based on the results of that working group, and they'd report everything done by the second week of December, whatever Julie just said.
That sound like something right upable, Julie?
Julie, does that
Actually, it
avoid-
would be November this year because you're going into it, and the year when there's a new legislature starting in December,
Yeah,
the report has to be submitted by November.
okay.
So Julie, does that avoid a fiscal note, this type of thing, or would it still have a fiscal note?
Well, the legislature has a certain amount of money appropriated for studies. If the legislative studies go to the study table in the appropriations committee, not the appropriations table, but a study table. And then at the end of the session, the council goes through the studies that are on that table and decides what can be funded within the budget that it has to fund studies. If there are more studies than there is budget money to spend on them, then there may need to be a fiscal note to provide more money to the legislative appropriation for studies in order to fund the studies. So at the end of the session, it gets reviewed by the legislative council and decisions are made about what gets funded and what doesn't.
I'm just wondering if that's what we want to do with this. I was just part of two working groups, one on registration plates, and so I don't think those working groups had fiscal notes. I mean, they didn't pay any of us to be part of them. I don't really, I wonder if there's some way to do something like that that avoids a fiscal note and having it go to a study table and all of that.
It would go to the study table regardless, because it does involve legislative resources. It involves, paying expenses for people to attend meetings. It includes providing staff.
Right,
it's not additional expenses for us, but it does. I think the rules provide anyway that they have to go to the study table.
Okay, I'm just wondering because these working groups I was part of, there was no additional compensation or anything to people that were on it. We were all essentially volunteers to be part of it. So I don't know how they were set up. It was through the transportation committee, but
There's staff that gets paid. The staff gets paid.
well, they use existing staff in the Secretary of State's office. In this case, we'd have an analyst from one of the committees, and then I don't really know. There'd be an additional expense.
Yeah, the staff is generally not an expense, but there's only so many studies that staff can staff during an interim. So they have to look at whether that's a problem. I don't think it usually is a problem, but it is something that they look at and consider.
Okay. Representative Hanley, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yes, thank you, Senator. My arm was getting tired, so.
Sorry about that.
Glad you called on.
Yeah.
Are we voting on or not to pass on the bill and the establishment of a working group? Is that going to be the motion?
Well, I think we would have to do ought to pass as amended and basically just do the working group, just that part of the bill. So taking everything else out and just doing the working group part.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna replace the bill
With a
with
result.
an amendment.
Yeah.
For a working group.
Yeah.
All right, I will support that. I don't want to support the passing of the legislation itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'll jump back in then with my motion, which is so ought to pass as amended, with the amendment being the formation of a working group to
But the striking of everything after the title.
to review the issues of the main seed capital tax credit.
Okay.
And do you want to
Thank you.
designate the type of, 2 members from each committee and all of that?
Yes, so we'll do 2 members. I would say actually probably 3 members each. Or 2, I don't know.
You could say 1 senator and 2 House members from each of the 3
Yeah, I
committees.
think that sounds about right. A senator and 2 House members from IDEA, GOC, and tax.
Yeah, then it's clear the senators are appointed by the Senate President, House members appointed by the Speaker of the House.
Correct. Thank you, Senator Chipman. Yes.
Okay, so the amendment to, yeah, strike everything in the bill except the last part about the working group.
Point of order, Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
and including an analyst from
Oh, yeah.
one of the committees.
Yes.
Well,
Go ahead, Julie.
the joint rule provides that that the council assigns staffing.
Okay,
Ledge Council assigned staffing, correct.
so we'll be silent on the staffing and just specify that there's 3 members from each committee, 2 House members and 1 senator from the 3 committees. It'll be 9 legislators, and then whatever staff is assigned by legislative council.
Yeah.
Okay, committee discussion on, is there a second to that motion? Seconded by Representative Sachs. Motion made by Representative Terry. Go ahead, Representative Stakis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we can all agree on the committee that the best opportunity for any of these bills to pass would be to be as bipartisan as possible. One of the things I generally recommend is, instead of simply, the blanket idea of, a senator and 2 House members from each committee, would be a senator and House members from each committee and appointed by their respected caucuses. That way there we end up with an even number of, Republicans, independents, and Democrats on these committees to get as close to a good, solid bipartisan result as possible, which stands the best chance of passing. I think if we're going to do the work, we ought to probably try to make it as, universally accepted as possible.
Okay, committee discussion.
Yeah.
Terry?
Yeah, I haven't, the only language that I'm familiar with, and I have only been part of a few working groups, is a majority and minority party. I haven't been part of any working group that includes voting by caucus. So I would love to hear more about that, though. I agree with you, Representative Stekis, that the bigger bipartisan view of things is best for getting good work done.
How would we do that?
If I could just interject, there are some examples out there.
Yeah.
My work on the Labor Committee and that sort of thing, we did that a couple of times with, different economic development things. And so there are examples of that happening. And I think, especially in this hyper-partisan time, maybe we should think outside the box a little bit. And we have the power and the ability in this committee to draft that language like that. There's no reason why we can't.
Yeah,
So,
I agree. I think
I'm
that's
going to
great.
suggest this, Representative Stekis, because we're talking about 1 senator and 2 House members from each committee, and so there's only 3 senators on each committee to begin with, and we don't know who's going to be available of those 3. So why don't we say of the House members, 1 from each caucus, so 1 Democrat, 1 Republican from each of the 3 committees on the House members, but where there's only 1 senator from each committee, leave that up to, I guess the Senate President to decide. I mean, it may be that only the Republicans available, or maybe the Republicans not available, and we need 1 of the Democrats or something. But since there's only going to be one senator from each committee, leave that part up to the Senate President perhaps, and then the House members, 1 Republican, 1 Democrat from each. Does that seem okay?
I would also add, I wouldn't leave out independents. I think it's fair.
Okay. Got a couple hands up, Representative Collins.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say that what Representative Stekis is, I think makes perfect sense, and I like to see more of that with everything we do. So thank you.
Julie, you've got your hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think you've clarified. I just wanted to make sure in terms of the bipartisanship. So we're talking about 1 senator from each of the 3 committees appointed by the President of the Senate without mentioning party membership, and 2 members of the House, 1 with the majority party and one, what we usually say is not in the majority party, so it permits independents to be appointed.
Cool, that sounds great.
To be, yeah, and appointed by those parties, but I mean, I guess like the Democratic caucus could appoint an independent, for instance, you know, not saying that they have to appoint a member of their caucus, but saying that the member is appointed by them, and if they want to pick an independent, they can, or the same with the Republican side.
It's the speaker who would do the appointments.
Okay.
And also appoint the chairs.
All right. Is everybody clear on that? And we'll have language review too on this, so if there's anything that's not clear, we can always clarify it there. But are you clear, Julie, from your perspective?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I think so.
All right. Seeing no more hands up, I guess we're ready to vote on the motion of ought to pass as amended. All those in favor, please signify.
Got it. Thank you.
That's unanimous of all members present. So we'll close the work session on LD 1941, which concludes all of our work sessions that we have scheduled for today. Is there anything else we need to discuss, or do you have any amendments for review, Julie, for us? You're on mute, Julie.
Sorry. Thank you for reminding me. I don't have anything today for amendment review, but I did want to mention that there will be something coming to you soon, and I've spoken with the chairs, and they've agreed to follow the procedure that we used last session, which is when the amendments are ready for review, that I will email them out to all of you. It goes with a alert in capital letters, so you'll know this is an amendment review. And if we don't hear back from you that there are any issues by the end of the next business day after the email goes out. So if it goes out on a Friday, for instance, you would have until the end of the business day on Monday, although next Monday is not a business day, so it would be Tuesday. But to indicate a concern to either myself or the chairs. And if a concern is indicated, then it won't be reported out until, the chairs will decide how to address your concern. I also wanted to mention that, as you know, budget language has been presented to the Appropriations Committee. They're beginning the process of looking what provisions are assigned to what committee. There'll be a public hearing. You'll know that the Policy Committee of Jurisdiction is asked to join the Appropriations Committee during the public hearing. But the bill does not have an LD number yet and can't be scheduled for public hearing until it gets one. I'm in the process of separating out the provisions that would be under the Taxation Committee jurisdiction, and intend to prepare a budget packet for each of you. I think now that you're generally in session on Wednesdays, you're going to be in session next Wednesday. I can probably even prepare a packet for you on paper that I can leave down in the Taxation Committee room for you next Wednesday, perhaps, so that when you're in here for session on Wednesday, you could stop by and pick it up. We haven't heard anything about schedule yet in terms of a hearing or work session. So don't know when any of those things are going to be, but I wanted to mention to you that that's here in our office at this point, at least. And I haven't looked, but I'm sure it's been posted online as well, probably somewhere under the Appropriations Committee materials on the OFPR page. If you want to go ahead with it, but I will be putting together a package which includes a chart of the provisions plus the language from the budget bill, the sections, the pages from the budget bill that have been presented by the administration that relate to your issues.
Okay. Representative Stuckis.
Thanks, Chair. Just a question pertaining to LD 1732. I apologize for my lack of experience on this. Since that work session is closed, is it possible to change my my ought not to pass to an amendment.
So
Straight ought not to pass an amended, ought not to pass with an amendment.
I mean, your report can be whatever you want it to be. So since you were voted in opposition, you know, your report could be a not to pass as amended and do something different than what.
Somebody direct me on how I go about that, who I contact, that sort of thing.
Well, just work with Julie, our analyst, and you know, the clerk hearing you now, you know, you want your report to be instead of ought not to pass, it's ought to pass as amended. I don't think we have to have another.
Yeah, it's very, very simple and straightforward. So it's not going to be done.
Go ahead, Terry.
I think we have to reconsider.
Yes.
Yep, we just need to reconsider. And
Okay.
I'm 100% comfortable with asking the committee if we can reconsider LD
I appreciate that.
1732.
Okay, so we have a motion not to move to reconsider LD 1732. We have a second from Representative Carmichael. All those in favor of reconsidering, please signify. Sorry, Representative Steckes. I thought it was easier than that, but all right.
My apologies.
So we're now reconsidering LD 1732.
Julie's got her hand up.
Go ahead, Julie.
Technically, if Representative Steckes also wants to pass, wants to vote, ought to pass as amended, and his amendment is different than the majority version. Technically, I think the joint rules say that he's supposed to specify what the contents of his bill would be. His amendment, sorry.
I can do that. I can do that roughly verbally, and we can tighten up the language specifically after. Is that how that works?
Yeah, I mean, well, we're
Yes.
now in reconsideration, so we're having committee discussion. Do you want to let us know what you're thinking?
Oh, absolutely. So, so in the bill itself, I believe it's line 14, the title of the paragraph, I would change from nonprofit. It just says nonprofit organizations. I would change that from nonprofit and include for-profit organizations or contractors. And then the language would reflect that change and would actually say something to the effect of sales to nonprofit and for-profit organizations and contractors. So as my argument for voting against it, this basically changes it to where the I mean, if we really feel that this tax break is going to help create more low-income housing, then I think if we did it across the board for profits and nonprofits, we would increase low-income housing, which I think is the objective.
Okay, so that's what you, go ahead, Julie.
Just as a technical drafting matter, I don't think there's any, if you're saying nonprofit and for-profit, I don't think there's anything outside of that. So I think what we would say is, rather than saying nonprofit and for-profit, we would just say sales to organizations whose primary purpose is. So we just take out the nonprofit. So it would apply to any organization whose primary purpose is to develop housing for low-income people.
You're the expert on this. I would
Yeah,
say.
I did the
The
proofreaders down in the revisor's office would not like profit or nonprofit.
Thank you.
So any further committee discussion? So we're go ahead, Representative Hanley.
Yes, I would like to change my vote to support this amended version.
So yeah, so we'll vote again, and you want to vote with Representative Steckes then at that point. Yeah. Go ahead, Representative Terry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only thing that I would say to taking it out of nonprofit and going to anyone building low-income housing is that right now there's a mechanism for check and balance with the nonprofit world versus that of folks that are in the for-profit business. So I just want to throw that out there, that there is checks and balances for nonprofit. There is not necessarily for a for-profit business. So just throwing that out there.
That information.
Representative Sachs.
And I'd just like to echo also that the fiscal note on this was was estimated at most at $250,000. This seemed to be a really just sensible tweak. I would certainly encourage, if we wanted to expand it, to do it in a more considered thought. It's not a bad thought, but honestly, this was a very contained, specific, encouraging Maine businesses to build more Maine housing for a specific demographic of low income, and just expanding that a little bit. And I think an on the fly, as they say, math on Mike, I really would, I'm not going to vote for that. I understand the impetus behind it, Representative Stetkis, but feel like the sensible approach of this bill in its original form is really what I'd like to support at this time.
Go ahead, Julie.
Thank you. I just want to clarify, when I mentioned the $50,000 to $250,000 cost, that was the cost of the current exemption the way it is now. Under the bill, that would be expanded to include, to expand the definition of low income to include people that are not currently included. So I assume it would be more, but we do not have an estimate of what it would be as amended by this bill. The only thing we have is the estimate from current law.
Right. And thank you, Julie. And so since it was a very conservative bump, again, I felt like that was, whatever that happened to be, was thoughtful in its approach. And I think sort of this wide open approach, our fiscal impact could really be exponential without some additional data. Thank you.
Right. Additional committee discussion. So do we have a motion then? Do you want to make a motion again, Representative Terry, on?
Yep. I would still like to make a motion ought to pass as amended with the fiscal note from the original bill.
Okay, is there a second? So we have a motion made by Representative Terry, ought to pass as amended with the fiscal note, seconded by Representative Sachs. Committee discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor of that motion, please signify. Let us know when you have everybody, Lena.
I think I got it.
Okay, all those
Thank you.
opposed? Representative Carmichael, you voting?
There you go. Thank you.
So that's that motion.
I really appreciate you all going through all this. Yes.
So that motion carries. So Representative Stetkis, what's the report of the minority? You just want to state that again for Julie. I guess you got it earlier, but you're going to be ought to pass as amended using the amendment that you spoke about earlier.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Excellent. So that concludes the reconsideration of LD 1732. Anything else for today, Representative Terry? You think we're all set?
I think we're all set.
You have anything else for us, Julie? And Lena, do you have anything for us? Is everybody caught up on their votes, or are you waiting to hear from folks?
I'm just waiting for one, but he got back to me. I'm just waiting for, I think, his vote from Rose.
Okay.
I guess that's, seeing that, I will just do the usual reminder this time of year to make sure that you check in with Lena and our colleagues as well. If you notice anybody not here, make sure that everybody checks in with Lena for voting so we can get things out of committee and onto the floor. Great.
Yeah, so we're moving right along, and we're in pretty good shape in terms of where we are, but we did table another bill today, so we'll have more work to do next week. We'll meet again on Tuesday. Before we adjourn, I just wanted to say a word about something that happened earlier. So last week, I shared some words with you that presiding officers wanted us to remind folks of their behavior and ethics and treating each other with respect. And that not only applies to us, but it applies to people appearing before the committee, people speaking at public hearings, members of the public that come to work sessions to provide additional information, as we had earlier. And on the bill LD 1334, we heard from Eric Van Wyk and providing some additional information. And in the course of that, there was it seemed like, and looking back on it, and thinking about it, some inappropriate things said about the Maine Film Office and impugning the integrity or questioning the motives of the Maine Film Office. And that was definitely not appropriate. And I want to apologize for not jumping in at the time and stopping that. And it didn't go on too long, but some things were said that were not appropriate. And for that, I apologize for not jumping in as the person chairing the meeting at the time to stop that from happening. I'm sorry if anybody was offended by that, and hope that the folks involved in that bill can work together and bring us something for next year and treat each other with respect. But definitely, try to do a better job of making sure that kind of thing, if it does happen in the future, that we jump in and cut people off so that it doesn't continue. So with that, unless anybody else has anything, I think we're all set for today. So we'll see everybody Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock, and have a good weekend. All right.